We're only a few weeks now from Lightfall, the next major expansion from Bungie in Destiny 2, so now is a really good time to have a look back at the last 12 months and review the Witch Queen expansion. So we've got the highs, the lows, the state of PVE and PVP, plus also the seasons and the events as well. There's a whole load to get through today, so strap in, get cozy, and let's have a look back at the Witch Queen expansion in Destiny 2. Okay, without further delay, let's have a look at the Witch Queen itself. So the Witch Queen expansion launched in February 2022, after a fairly long delay and a whole load of expectation from the community. The Taken King was one of the most popular expansions in Destiny history, and the preceding Destiny 2 expansion was Beyond Light, which, while it was a step up over Shadowkeep, still didn't really hit the heights of Forsaken back in 2018 and 2019. Bungie had gone independent from Activision, they were doing things their own way and expectations were high for the Witch Queen, and there was also loads of build-up related to Savathûn, and that was building up for the last 3 years. Well, the Witch Queen expansion was great. Bungie introduced legendary campaigns, which was a new implementation of difficulty in the game. We've been so used to Legend or Master Mode Nightfalls or raids, and more champions, but this was all scaled differently, and it felt really, really good. Story was pretty good too, hitting all the major story beats, solving the mystery of how Savathûn and selective Hive Lightbearers acquired the light. It was simply down to the Traveller chose them. We all thought it'd be a case of Savathûn stealing the light, but our expectations were turned on their head in a satisfying campaign, plus also a fitting end for Savathûn. Alongside the campaign, we were introduced to our first light subclass rework in the form of Void. Over the course of the Witch Queen expansion, each subclass would get their 3.0 treatment, bringing them into line with Stasis, and Bungie started with a fan favourite. This introduced the Aspect and Fragment model to Void, and we're definitely in a much better place with build crafting given the options that we have now. Bungie are doing some major reworking to the mods and build crafting systems coming in Lightfall, but the first light rework did feel like a success. Well, glaives, they were also introduced into the game, the first new weapon type since bows, and you could argue they were met with a mixed reaction. They are versatile weapons allowing players to stab, shoot projectiles, plus also block with shields as well. They came out of the gate pretty hot, and we all got to craft our very own glaive in the opening level of the campaign, followed up with a fairly underwhelming exotic glaive post-campaign quest. So glaives did have to be drawn in later in the Witch Queen expansion in terms of power, but with Bungie preferring them to go into the game overpowered rather than underpowered. Crafting was another major addition in the Witch Queen. Destiny 2 is all about the loot chase. We've had to rely on RNG since the dawn of time in this looter shooter, but now by collecting a certain number of red border versions of the weapons and leveling them up, we'd be able to extract the patterns and various crafting materials. So I've kind of come round to the crafting system, although Bungie did have to rein in the number of crafting materials a few seasons into the Witch Queen, given it was very convoluted. So Destiny 2 is known for its materials and complex systems, but this was a step too far, and Bungie reduced the number of materials required and buffed the drop rates of the red border weapons season over season. The Throne World was a great addition to the game. This was a swampy land infested with Lucent and light-bearing Hive. The Throne World had components of Mars, combinations of Destiny 1 Mars with an exotic mission Vox Obscura, and Destiny 2 Mars with the Heist Battlegrounds. We had the swamps, plus the underground caves of the Throne World, plus also Savathûn's palace itself. The Hive Lightbearers were a good addition to the game, although beyond the expansion and the first season, we didn't really see them utilised very much at all, and that was slightly disappointing. We've had 2 new strikes including the Light Blade and Birthplace of the Vile. We saw the return of Al-Lakhul, this time renamed as the Light Blade rather than the Dark Blade, a returning favourite character from Destiny 1. Now, all in all, the Witch Queen campaign and location were solid, and that leads us nicely into Season of the Risen. Well, seasons that accompany major expansions normally aren't great. Undying came with Shadowkeep, Hunt came with Beyond Light, and both didn't really hold up to regular seasons. This is understandable, given much of the effort is likely to go into the major expansions. Season of the Risen appeared to buck that trend with a decent season. So in terms of a brief summary for the story, we were working with the Cabal to study Hive Lightbearers to find out more about their plans now they've attained the light through Savathûn. The main focal point of the season from a character development point of view was Crow, Lord Saladin and Keitel. Crow didn't like the fact that we were studying the Hive Lightbearers, but Saladin insisted sometimes in war you have to do what needs to be done. The season ended with Lord Saladin leaving to join the Cabal, which we would learn later he rose quickly through the ranks. We had a couple of activities in the season, including PSYOP Battlegrounds and also the Vox Obscura exotic mission. PSYOP's Battleground had a few variations and saw us fighting inside the mines of Hive Lightbearers in an effort to study them. Vox Obscura was a repeatable exotic mission set on Mars from Destiny 1, and that included a fairly forgettable Dead Messenger exotic waveframe grenade launcher. I say forgettable, I didn't really use it that much, but I know it is popular in PvP. Vox Obscura was okay. Probably the most exciting thing come out of it was the lore and the teasers for the year to come. While it was better than other seasons that arrived with the expansions, it still didn't live up to the high standard of other seasons this year. Well, next up we got Season of the Haunted. So Season of the Haunted came with much build-up, with Destiny writers claiming on Twitter this was going to be a really, really good season. We saw the return of the Leviathan and Callus, plus the returning loot like Ostringer, Drang and Beloved. The story focused on the mental state of Zavala, Keitel and Crow, with Eris leading the way. We had the introduction of the Duality Dungeon, which had to be one of the best dungeons that we've got in the game, albeit with quite a lot of bugs. Nightmare Containment was our activity, and this did get fairly repetitive over time, and by the end of the season, I think Destiny fans were glad not to be doing that anymore. We also saw the introduction of our second light subclass rework, and that was Solar 3.0. Well, next up we had Season of Plunder. So this one was all about Eramis, Drifter, Spider, Mithrax and Ido. We find out more about Mithrax's past, plus Spider was smuggled back into the game with the help of Drifter. So that season we learned about the dangerous relics of darkness containing the remains of a powerful being called Nezarec, who was the disciple of the Lunar Pyramid. The Elixni had been searching for these powerful relics. Eramis broke free from a frozen stasis prison and was a constant thorn in the side of Mithrax. Ido and Mithrax, they've been studying the relics we collected throughout the season, although at the end of the season it was all a little bit of an anti-climax, with the storyline related to Nezarec. Well, the final light subclass got its rework that season with Arc 3.0. I really enjoyed playing Arc that season. Titans came out very strong with the Storm Grenades, and I also really liked the Hunter's new super. Warlocks kind of felt like they got the short end of the stick again, although, to be honest, I don't really mind, given I tend to play all three classes at the same time. We had a couple of seasonal activities, Catch Crash, Expeditions and Pirate Hideouts. Expeditions were probably my favourite of the three, and the Pirate Hideouts were a good way to reuse old lost sectors. Catch Crash got stale for me fairly quickly, even though Bungie were trying to recreate a menagerie-style activity. So here was another place where the seasonal model was really showing its age, going to the seasonal vendor, ranking up on that grid, seasonal challenges, and repeating that seasonal activity. So overall, it was an interesting season. It all started out on such a high. We launched on Epic Game Store, and there was loads of new players, and that dropped off quicker than most seasons. Community sentiment then soured, with many turning to Twitter. They were going to publicly proclaim they were cancelling their Lightfall pre-order. And that was a behaviour that I didn't really understand, and it all seemed like a big cry for attention. So compared to other seasons in The Witch Queen, this one felt like the weakest one so far. Given it's the middle season, that is probably okay. You don't really want a season like Plunder going into a major expansion. Well, finally, we've got this season, that is Season of the Seraph. This was a much previewed storyline with Anna Bray and Rasputin coming back into the fold. Xivu Arath also takes a starring role, given she's trying to get hold of Rasputin's warsats and cause an extinction level event on Earth. We've got to restore the Warman Rasputin, given he was siphoned into an engram when the pyramid ships turned up in Season of Arrivals, and that was the season before Beyond Light. As well as the weekly narrative beats, we also got a great dungeon and exotic mission, and while the story is a little bit confusing, it is very gripping as we lead into the main story of Lightfall. Well, this season we've got one seasonal activity, and that is Heist Battlegrounds. It's been given a major upgrade in difficulty. We've got regular Heist Battlegrounds and Legend Heist Battlegrounds, which often feel like Nightfalls compared to Strikes in regards to the difficulty. Structure is pretty interesting as we start out in a battle in open space. So on somewhere like the Moon or Mars, then we open up a Seraph bunker, spelunk inside and defeat a few enemies to delve further into the bunker and face off against a combination of Hive and Fallen. So it's definitely refreshing to have a single season activity to focus on, Plus that difficulty is really nice and the loot is quite good too. Well, the dungeon is called Spire of the Watcher. This one is based on Mars near the Enclave. Much of the early feedback about the dungeon was it was short, the mechanics were simple, and the bosses are bullet sponges. And while I do agree with the latter feedback about the bosses, I have come around to the mechanics, whereby we have to reconnect electrical cables throughout the play space. I also like the vertical nature of the dungeon, plus the loot is excellent. I still don't have my cowboy hat, although I do have all the other major armour. The Tex Mechanica loot is fantastic. We've got the new sidearm, that can roll Desperado. We've got the long arm, the legendary version of the DMT, and we also have that machine gun as well, so that's really good loot. The dungeon is also farmable, meaning you can go in time and time again if you're looking to get that full set of cowboy gear. Well, next we've got Operation Seraph Shield, and this one is an exotic mission. There's quite a lot of puzzles, but there's some big set pieces, and I think it's certainly one of the best exotic missions Bungie have put out in a long time. Vox Obscura was another exotic mission similar to this, although this one far exceeds Vox Obscura. This one does reuse some assets from the Deepstone Crypt, but personally I don't mind this too much, as that is one of the best looking environments we have in Destiny. Plus you've got the individual moments like going out in the space station, handing yourself into the Fallen, before running through the Ketch, all guns blazing. Well then, at the end of the exotic mission, we've got the exotic pulse rifle Revision 0, which we can customise week over week with 4 catalysts. Then we've got zones and secrets to uncover within the mission itself. It may not hit the heights of a Whisper mission or 0 Hour, but this is by far the best exotic mission we've seen in the Beyond Light and the Witch Queen era Destiny. Okay, next up I want to ask one simple question, and where are we leading into Lightfall? So PvE is probably in the best place it's ever been in the game. We're powerful, although we have to be mindful of power creep. Bungie's experiments with new difficulty scaling for activities is very interesting, in particular with Operation Seraph Shield, and that feels like an experiment related to the legendary Witch Queen campaign. The story is great in Destiny at the moment. We've got a variety of raids, including the best raids from Destiny 1. The subclass reworks were much needed and well received, and we're in a much better place now with all subclasses up to the same standard. I still have a lot of fun in PvE content. Grandmasters keep me challenged, and I'm still chasing various loot drops from the dungeons and the raids. PvP, on the other hand, is not in a good place. Bungie did some experimentation in Control with SBMM. They had to go back on that and implement loose SBMM. This seemed to work well for new or low skill players, and made the experience much worse for the high skill players. SBMM in Control is strange, given Control is somewhere to hang out in Crucible, and it's supposed to be the casual playlist, and this made it anything but casual. Well, Iron Banner introduced new game modes called Eruption and Fortress, and that seemed to go down much better in the community compared to New Rift. Trials introduced a couple of new weapons, and ironically Trials seems to be the most casual playlist right now. In Season of the Seraph, we've seen a major rework for competitive PvP, with the introduction of the competitive division and a ranked playlist. Now, I have seen a lot of negative feedback concerning new competitive, however, personally, I quite like it. In terms of loot to chase, we got Rose, a 140 hand cannon, reissued from Destiny's past. Once you complete your placement matches, 7 regular matches of comp, you get a static roll of Rose. Then, week over week, you can complete 3 more matches to get a random rolled version of Rose, and this gun has some really excellent perks. You can't really go wrong when it comes to getting that hand cannon. The problem with competitive at the moment, though, is there really isn't an incentive to keep playing. There's no unique cosmetics for comp, and you can't really show off your rank in-game. These are basic design flaws that are going to turn players off. Bungie may be laying the groundwork for further competitive rework features in the future, like adding more loot and cosmetics, but I've heard plenty of feedback from top-tier players that really this is not it. In fact, many PvP players are questioning their place in the Destiny 2 ecosystem, and that is unfortunate. Well, finally, let's have a look at the core playlist. So the core playlist in Destiny 2 definitely needs some love, and I'm talking about Vanguard Ops, or Strikes, Crucible, and Gambit. While the seasonal model is getting stale, at least it's varied, but more often than not you have to go into the same core playlist and grind out currencies. The core playlists for Destiny 2 have largely stayed the same, or content has been cut due to sunsetting with Beyond Light. So Strikes, Crucible maps, Gambit maps, all have been removed, leaving those core playlists pretty repetitive. Some improvements have been made recently with streaks and weapons getting more perks as you level up your vendor. However, we need more content in these playlists. Battlegrounds were added to Vanguard Ops, which was a good move, but we need more strikes. We've got a wealth of Destiny 1 strikes to call upon, but even better than that would be new strikes on Europa, Savathun's Throne World, and the Dreaming City. So when we get a new expansion, it'd be great to get more than 2 strikes, and in Beyond Light we only got 1. Strikes could also be harder, and we could also have strike modifiers, much like we had during Guardian Games, and hopefully this gets rolled out in the future. The Legendary campaign was a great success in the Witch Queen, and it'd be great to see all new strikes get a Legendary mode to go with it. Crucible, on the other hand, needs a lot of work, new maps, new modes. That's just a starting point. Experimenting in Trials of Osiris seems fairly successful, and the transparent data from that exercise was great, and hopefully we're going to see more of that. Gambit feels like it's already been set to one side. We've got so few maps there now, so returning old maps would be a great start. But also, I'd love to see return from the ideas from Gambit Prime. Honestly, it feels like Bungie have tried to breathe new life into Gambit so many times, but perhaps it's time to cut and run with Drifter's game mode. Well, that is it for my review of Destiny 2 Witch Queen and the seasons and Year 5 as a whole. Thank you so much for watching or listening. For more Destiny 2 content like this, hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe to This Week in Video Games. Or you can check me out on Twitter at TWIVG Podcast. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, liking and sharing the video would really help me out. Otherwise, check out the videos on the channel. Well, thanks again, and I'll see you soon.